All right. Welcome, everyone. We're diving into a pretty intense chapter of Bangladeshi history today.
Yeah, definitely intense.
This is something a lot of you have asked about, wanting to understand what happened with the assassination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman.
The nation's first president.
Exactly. So to really get into this, we're going right to the source. We've got a translated interview with Major Dalim,
Oh, wow.
and he was right in the thick of it all.
Yeah, you know what's so interesting about this is that we get his personal perspective.
Yeah.
Not just a historical overview, but we hear from somebody who's actually there.
And not just that, we've also got his book.
Oh, wow. Even better.
So even more detail to add to what he says in the interview.
This is going to be fascinating.
Okay, so set the scene. It's 1975.
Okay.
Just 4 years after the liberation war with Pakistan. Bangladesh is this brand new nation.
So much uncertainty.
Oh, yeah, tons of challenges, right? And what's striking is that even back during the war, Dalim had this deep mistrust of India's intentions. He felt like India was, kind of pulling strings, trying to make Bangladesh dependent on them.
Not really independent.
And definitely not true independence, and he saw the 7-point agreement as a big part of that.
That's really important, the 7-point agreement.
It is.
I mean, this is the roadmap for how Bangladesh is going to be governed.
Yeah.
But put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
You fought this bloody war for independence, and then your ally,
The one who helped you.
right, the one who helped you achieve this freedom, is now basically saying, okay, here's how you have to run your country.
Yeah.
And some of the points that Dalim brings up are things like Indian troops still being in Bangladesh.
Right.
Restrictions on how strong their own military can be.
Right.
Limits on their foreign policy. I
You
mean,
can see how that would make people nervous.
oh, absolutely. It's like,
Yeah.
Did we just trade one kind of control for another, or are we a satellite state?
Exactly.
And it's no surprise that this agreement becomes a flashpoint for people who are worried about that, just like Dalim.
It's almost like winning a race and then finding out that someone moved the finish line.
Oh, I like that analogy.
And that feeling of disillusionment only grew stronger after Bangladesh gained independence.
Right.
Mujib's policies, especially Boxal, where he establishes one-party rule,
Yeah.
really set off alarm bells for Dalim and a lot of his fellow officers.
Boxall was a huge turning point.
Yeah.
They went from this idea of a multi-party system that they talked about during the liberation struggle
Right.
to basically handing all the power to Mujib.
Right.
Now, some people argue that it was necessary, to stabilize this brand new country that was still very volatile.
To keep things from falling apart.
Yeah, exactly. But for a lot of people, especially in the military, it really felt like authoritarianism.
Like the opposite of what they fought for.
Exactly. It's like you're chipping away at the very ideals they fought for.
And then you add to that Mujib relying on all these Indian advisors.
Right.
It just fed into this fear that Bangladesh was becoming a puppet of India.
Exactly. It all just adds up. It's like this perfect storm.
So you have this clash between the idealism of the war and the harsh realities of governing a new nation.
Yeah, the dream versus the reality.
And out of this tension comes the Sena Parishad, this secret group of officers opposed to Mujib.
Yeah, these guys, they're battle-hardened. They put their lives on the line for an independent Bangladesh.
They're not going to just sit back.
No way. They're not going to just watch and see their hard-won freedom slipping away.
So they form this secret organization to fight back against what they see as Mujib becoming too powerful and India having too much influence.
Think about it. They risked everything for this dream, and now it feels like that dream's turning into a nightmare.
And here's where things get really interesting. Dalim reveals that Zia Rahman
Oh, wow.
was involved too.
The future president.
Yeah, at first Zia was actually on their side.
Wow.
He even swore an oath on the Quran pledging his allegiance to the Sena Parishad.
That's a serious commitment.
It shows how deeply worried they all were about where the country was headed.
Yeah. And swearing on the Quran. I mean, that's not just some casual promise. That's a sacred vow.
Absolutely, a pact bound by their deepest beliefs, to change the course of Bangladesh.
It's like a Shakespearean drama unfolding, right?
It really is. You've got secret pacts, you've got simmering resentment, and then there's this shadow of betrayal hanging over everything.
I can't wait to hear what happens next.
Okay, but before we get to that, let's talk about Dalim's kidnapping, because that's a whole other story.
Yeah, that sounds wild.
It is, and it really shows just how volatile things were in Bangladesh at the time. Okay, so picture it. Dalim is at his niece's wedding.
Oh, wow.
And suddenly he's kidnapped.
Seriously? At a wedding?
Yeah, by this group led by Ghazi Ghulam Mustafa.
Ghazi. The one close to Mujib.
Exactly, a powerful figure in Mujib's government. So it seems personal at first, right? Like a vendetta.
Yeah, you'd think so.
But it quickly blows up into this huge national crisis.
It's crazy how fast things escalated back then.
Oh, yeah. And this incident really shows just how unstable everything was.
It's like a powder keg waiting to explode.
Totally on the surface, you have this personal grudge.
Right.
But underneath, it's all this tension between the military and Mujib's government.
Yeah, they're already at odds.
Dalim thought it was payback for something that happened between his brother-in-law and Ghazi. But the fact that Ghazi was involved, someone so close to Mujib,
Yeah, that changes things.
it becomes more than just a personal dispute.
It's like a direct challenge to the government.
Exactly, like who's really in control here?
A power struggle.
And it's insane. They take Dalim and his family to Mujib's house.
It's Mujib's house.
Yeah, and then the army, they get mobilized by Dalim's brother.
Oh, wow. Family ties coming into play.
They surround the house.
So now you have the president basically held hostage in his own home by this military officer.
It's a standoff.
Talk about a bold move.
It really shows how frustrated the military was with Mujib.
They're not playing around anymore.
This isn't just about Dalim and Ghazi anymore. It's a direct challenge to Mujib's authority.
They're saying we've had enough.
And during all this, Mujib tries to calm things down.
How does he try to do that?
He actually apologizes to Dalim
Really?
and promises that Ghazi will face justice.
So he's trying to appease him.
But Dalim, he's not having it. He feels betrayed by Mujib by the direction the country is going.
Years of resentment building up.
He basically tells Mujib that he's put his faith in a higher power for justice.
Oh, wow. That's a chilling statement given what happens later.
Right. It's almost like a prophecy.
Foreshadowing.
It shows how disillusioned he was with the whole system, not just with Mujib.
He feels like the ideals of the liberation war have been completely abandoned.
Yeah, like everything they fought for was for nothing.
That's a heavy burden to carry.
And then just weeks after this whole confrontation, Mujib is assassinated.
Yeah, and Dalim claims that people were celebrating in the streets.
Like they were relieved.
So everyone is happy to see Mujib gone.
Well, that's how Dalim tells it. But we have to be careful about taking his word as the absolute truth.
Of course, there's always more to the story.
Right. It's not as black and white as everyone being thrilled about Mujib being removed from power.
It's never that simple, is it?
No, especially because even with his flaws, Mujib was a huge figure.
He was a symbol.
Yeah, the father of the nation, the one who led them to independence.
That's a powerful image.
So his death was a shock to the whole country.
Even if some people were unhappy with his rule, they still respected him.
Right. And who knows what would have happened if he hadn't been assassinated.
It's that be careful what you wish for kind of thing.
Exactly, because even if some people wanted Mujib gone, the consequences of his assassination were huge.
It changed everything.
It really did. Bangladesh entered a period of military rule and instability that lasted for years.
What's the lasting impact of all this?
That's the question, isn't it? How do we make sense of Mujib's role in all of this?
Yeah.
He's a hero of independence, but he's also a controversial figure.
It's interesting. Dalim paints this very negative picture of him, authoritarian, corrupt, a puppet of India.
Those are serious accusations.
They are. But we have to remember, Dalim was deeply involved in the events that led to Mujib's downfall.
So his view is probably biased.
Right. His perspective is colored by his own experiences and beliefs,
But some people did share his criticisms.
especially those who oppose Mujib's policies.
But at the same time, Mujib is still a revered figure in Bangladesh today.
It's complicated.
It really is. There's no easy answer when it comes to evaluating Mujib's legacy.
He's both a hero and a source of controversy.
It's a reminder that history is full of these contradictions.
There are rarely clear-cut good guys and bad guys.
And Mujib was a product of his time shaped by all the turmoil that led to Bangladesh's creation.
He made mistakes, he had his flaws, but he also had this incredible vision.
So it's up to us to try and understand all of that, to grapple with the complexities and form our own conclusions about his legacy. It's amazing how Dalim's own personal story ties into all these huge political events.
It really does.
It's like this ripple effect, right? Starting with that crazy incident at the wedding and then leading all the way to Mujib's assassination.
Yeah, and it shows how personal stuff can actually trigger massive political upheaval.
Especially when everything's already so unstable and there's so much mistrust.
Exactly, a powder keg.
And the fact that he was willing to go right up against Mujib,
Confront him like that.
to hold him accountable for what he saw as, Mujib turning his back on everything they fought for in the war.
Yeah, abandoning those ideals.
It really shows how strongly Dalim felt about all this.
He was committed to those principles.
Yeah, and it's incredible that through Dalim's story, we get this inside look at the Sena Parashad.
This secret group working against Mujib.
It's like we're getting a peek behind the curtain of history.
And they had this whole 25-year plan for Bangladesh.
Wow.
Their own blueprint for a nation free from Indian control. At least that's how they saw it.
It's like their vision for the future.
Yeah, and Ziaur Rahman was part of it at first.
The future president?
I mean, it makes you wonder what would happen if they'd stayed united.
What if things had gone differently?
Right. It's one of those big what-ifs of history.
It really shows how unpredictable things can be.
Absolutely.
But let's go back to after the coup, Dalim was forced to retire early, right?
Yeah, he was pushed out.
What about the other members of the Sena Parashad? What happened to them?
Well, after the coup, the military went through this huge shakeup.
Like a changing of the guard.
And a lot of the Sena Parashad members, they got sidelined at first.
Pushed aside.
But some of them, like Ziaur Rahman,
Yeah.
he eventually gained power.
Yeah, I became president.
Like, the political landscape of Bangladesh was completely reshaped.
Like an earthquake.
And the effects of that coup, they continue to ripple out for years to come.
So where does that leave us today? What can we learn from all this? From diving into Dalim's story and everything that happened with Mujib?
Well, even with Dalim's own biases, his story gives us this really valuable perspective on a crucial moment in Bangladeshi history.
Yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle.
And it reminds us that history isn't this simple story of heroes and villains.
It's messy.
It's complicated. It's woven together from people's choices, political ambitions, and all these unintended consequences.
And it shows how important it is to look at things from different angles.
Absolutely. We can't just take one person's word for it, no matter how compelling their story is.
We need to consider all the different perspectives.
Right. And analyze the political and social context and be willing to grapple with all the contradictions.
Because it's never black and white.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dalim's story is just a starting point.
A way in.
Yeah. And for you listening, the key takeaway here is that what happened with Mujib still has an impact on Bangladesh today.
It still matters.
His legacy, both as this hero of independence and this controversial figure, is still being debated.
People are still arguing about it.
And as you learn more about this period, ask yourself, how has Bangladesh's relationship with India changed since 1975? How has the nation dealt with the legacy of military rule? How have they worked to build a stable democracy?
Because history isn't just a bunch of dates and events.
More than that.
It's a conversation that keeps going, and we're all part of it as we try to understand how we got to where we are today.
That's the beauty of it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.